Hey guys, so I'm going to do a little bit on chapter 13. I'm going to have to adjust this a little bit so you can see it, but you can talk about just a couple things really quick. We'll do like 10, 15 minutes. Something wrong with my breathing. But, so, discretionary fiscal policy, some of the possible offsets to discretionary fiscal policy, FP in practice, lags, some of the problems when it's actually used that occur, and automatic stabilizers that kind of can come in or be, I guess they can replace actual fiscal policy. So what happens is, this is all from a Keynesian mindset. You have you go to chapter 13, you've got the long run aggregate supply curve, you've got your aggregate demand curve, and then you have this short run, right? So they kind of agree that in the long run, these are not big issues because you do have a long run. So if you were to look at the big picture of the 20th century, for instance, except for the 1929 or so, you had a couple years where you have these recessions, 1929, the Depression, all the way up until, well, in reality, it was up until about 1950 or so, but you have this, that was still considered kind of a short run offset. So what happens is, you'll have this short run. So remember, get rid of this short run aggregate supply curve. You have the basic classical economic model, which is changes in aggregate demand don't do anything to real GDP, right? This is the price level, price level, output. So remember, just like always, we have P and Q. In this case, Q is going to be total national output or economic output of the United States, GDP within the nation's borders, remember? And so if you get rid of this short run aggregate supply curve, you just have changes in aggregate demand will not do anything to actual real output, but instead they just cause inflation or deflation. So, and that's because you have a lot of flexibility in the job market and in the price market. And so if you have for some reason you have a shift down in aggregate demand, you'll have people are willing, because prices fall, people are willing to accept lower wages. And so you would remain at full employment. You would get back to full employment very quickly, but at a lower price level. But it wouldn't matter because prices are lower, your wages are lower, so in reality you buy the same amount of stuff with your dollars. Now, if we kind of separate this, we go off to economic growth, prices, wages, things like that, and economic growth, well, I should say wages and economic growth don't necessarily have to be, you don't have to have higher wages to get better economic growth. If things are produced more efficiently and the prices of those goods fall, then having the same wage but buying stuff that costs less, you're actually creating economic growth, right? Your well-being is increased because you can buy more goods and services. Okay, so let's go back to what we're talking about here though, specifically. They didn't give me an eraser. So anyways, you have this short run aggregate supply curve, and in the Keynesian, this is the neo-Keynesian model, the new Keynesian. So you have the classical one where Keynes himself said it was a flat line and changes in aggregate demand only, they won't do anything to the price level because wages and prices are sticky and yet. So then you go to reality, which is that doesn't work, and they don't see that this works because of some of the issues you have in the economy with a lot of regulation and unions and wage contracts and contracts with suppliers and all these things where it might be difficult to change your price. And Well, for instance, they have something called, what is it called? It's called lightning. And what it is if you go to the grocery store, if you remember, you probably don't, nobody tends to. So let's say you went to the grocery store 2 years ago and you bought a box of cereal. And then you go today and you buy that same box of cereal, would you notice that it's probably a smaller box? The face on the shelf is going to be the same, but typically it's going to be thinner, or the bag inside is just going to be less. Like now you open up a bag of Ruffles or potato chips and you're like, good grief, it's half air. Yeah, right? So they secretly sort of, I mean, they don't make it a secret or anything, but you know, you've got your bag and you've got your ounces down here and they reduce the ounces. And the reason they do that is it's very difficult to raise prices if you're producing stuff on that level. So they don't like doing it. And they don't like doing it because they'll lose customers, right? People that buy chips are pretty used to knowing that that bag of chips is like $2.99 or $3.99 or whatever. So when they go buy it and it's $4.50, they might not be very happy and they might decide to go with another brand. Now the other brand price went up too, but they don't know it because they never bought that other brand, right? So you'll see. So that's why they don't like raising the price. People tend to find alternatives. So what you have in the classical model is, the neo-Keynesian model is, here's your aggregate demand. We start here, okay? So equilibrium, and let's say you have the animal spirits. People become concerned about the future, and so they reduce their spending. Prime, right? So spending falls, and now in the short run, you have this movement along the curve, right? Now in the classical model, it would say, oh, well, you know, prices would fall, wages would adjust, and you would stay at that long run, you know, right along the long run aggregate supply curve. But in the original Keynesian model, he would say, oh no, prices would stay the same because everything's sticky, but you would have a fall in total output. Well, now they say, okay, that doesn't seem to work. And maybe it is the case that you will have changes in total output given these recessionary conditions. So the neo-Keynesians will say, okay, we think it would appear that there's a little bit of both, right? So maybe neither side was completely right. And so what you'd have both a fall in prices and a reduction in output. Right, so here's on the short run, so given a recession, during the recession, you would have layoffs and prices would fall and that would cause more layoffs and things like that. And so you have this new output. So this is Q naught. And so how do you get back to your long run aggregate supply curve? Or at least stimulate the economy such that instead these layoffs, you can put these people back to work, they can go back to producing things, and that's where discretionary fiscal and discretionary monetary policy come in. But we're just going to talk about fiscal policy. And what does discretionary fiscal policy mean? Any thoughts? Guess? It means government, right? So it means you're going to have changes in government policy. Discretionary spending, right? Okay, so that means government's going to come in and they're going to try to stimulate the economy through, remember, y equals c plus I. If you watch the video, c to I to g to, I forget how it goes, c plus I plus g, and we'll forget net exports for the moment. But if you can increase something, now you could boost private consumption, individuals' consumption through tax cutting. So, you know, Trump is a Keynesian economist because he's grown up in that sphere. And so and actually George W. Bush did the same thing. They were trying to offset a recession. So George Bush W. Bush, you had 9/11, you had the dot-com burst, then you had 9/11, you had this recession, no president ever wants a recession in their first term. Reagan had a real estate recession that actually what happened is in order to fix what happened in the 70s, which is stagflation, hyperinflation, and poor growth or negative growth, they raised interest rates, caused a recession, but they had to get it over with quick enough to get the economy back going so that he could get reelected. Because after all, it's the economy, stupid. That was Bill Clinton's famous phrase. And so in the 90s, you had those two things, big problems, dot-com bubble. Everybody thought, oh, if it says .com, it's massively, it's gonna grow enormously. So what they did is they put a lot of money in there and then it crashed. And then you had 9/11 that caused another recession. So to fix that, they drove down interest rates, stimulated the housing market. What they were trying to do is stimulate the economy. And George W. Bush had tax cuts in 2006, I think it was, somewhere around there. And every person got it's a stimulus check, they call it. And the idea is to get people to take that check and go out and spend it. I'll talk about reasons that they didn't. But, so you have tax cuts, the Bush tax cuts, the Bush stimulus check, let us see. And so these are basic policies they'll inflict, they'll put out, and the idea is to try to get people to consume, so they were weary about the future, or you had 9/11, and so, you know, a big kind of supply shock, really, but, hello.
Hi. It's good to
Oh, yeah, fine, just recorded a video. Waiting for some people to show up. But they had, a shift in aggregate demand, and what you needed to do, or what they thought they needed to do, was try to stimulate. And so they did those things, and that's one of those is a tax rebate to everybody who paid taxes. You give them their money back, or a portion of their money back, and hope that they go spend it. The other thing is, this is monetary policy, and that's with changing the interest rates, trying to get investment going. So again, what they did is they also lowered the interest rates to try to boost private investment, so people would go out and borrow more money and invest it in the economy somewhere, in their business or whatever. And the most popular thing is roads and bridges. Right? So government will increase discretionary spending. Now the problem, we talk about offsets, and there's a lot of problems with these. And the Freakonomics article about the basketball team gives a really great example, a real world example. So let's talk about, I'll just really quick, the idea here is if you increase consumer spending by giving them checks, they'll go out, they'll spend it, and you get back to here. Now, the opposite would be if you have people start spending a lot, and then we're in an inflationary scenario. We need to cool off the economy, and so you do the opposite. Maybe raise taxes, government will reduce spending, something like that. But generally, they don't really worry too much about that, I don't think, because this is bad politics, right? So politically, not good to have people without a job. People without a job don't want you back in office. So, hold on. Hi. Oh, are you in my class? Yeah.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes. Yeah, come on in.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are you gonna teach?
Welcome back to this.